I've been supporting the National Cannabis Fest since 2019, continuously going. Robin here is my liaison. She's actually a VIP to the actual National Cannabis Fest.
Tomorrow.
I'll be out there tomorrow.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So,
well, look, I've got a few minutes. I'd love to be able to share just a little bit of knowledge.
Take
I
your time.
can introduce myself and just talk a little bit about what I'm doing, and we can just jump straight into it if you don't mind. Can I just, or you do the intro, or how we do it?
Oh, you already gave yourself a good intro, but I'll be glad to introduce
all right.
I got music.
That's my ringtone.
intro music. I love it. Okay, everything's rolling.
Gentlemen, you guys are good to go.
Mr. Eugene Kinlow, good to meet you, sir. Thank you for spending this time with us. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to offer. I mean, there's so much ground to cover, and everywhere is a good place to start.
That's right.
Right. So, can you give us a good introduction of what you're here for?
All right, well, let's just start in the place. First of all, I want to just acknowledge where we are. This is hallowed ground. You know, we are down here in the Shaw community. Used to come at this little spot back in the day, probably in the 70s. The neighborhood was a lot different than it is nowadays, but it was still vibrant, energetic. The people came here to get a word and to get a meal. So at the corner of 7th and Wilson's.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Eugene Kinlow, and I'm running for U.S. Senator in Washington, D.C. And I'm running because Washington residents, we need statehood. Statehood, without statehood, we are second-class citizens. Let me just give you just one example of how we're second-class citizens. Today is April 19th. Tomorrow will be April 20th, 420. The residents of Washington, D.C. voted a number of years ago to support legalization of recreational cannabis, as have 33 other states throughout the Union. But in Washington, D.C., it's a little bit different because you've got overseers in Congress who are able to tell us what we can and cannot do with our own money, with our own product, with our own bodies. And on this issue, they have come in and said, we cannot have a legal cannabis regime. That means the ability to set up a business, to be able to tax it. The government is not getting any benefit from setting it up. Yet every other state is able to set up its own program, its own regime, so that the residents can benefit from the businesses that get it set up. The businesses that have gotten set up here in Washington, D.C., there's some challenges. You can't go to the banks and get money because it's legal to possess cannabis, but in terms of the transactional and be able to taxation, there's some issues there. And those issues have been caused by Congress. Congress came in and said, yeah, we understand that other states have done this and we have not weighed in, but because it's you here in Washington, D.C., we have a particular interest, and we're going to stop you from doing what the people have already voted to do. So that's just one example. But just understand that multiplied by a variety of issues affects most of the Washingtonians here in Washington, D.C. Congress is a problem to us. And I think it's clear that people can see nowadays that Congress is even a problem to itself. I mean, they're going through speakers of the House like it's the dessert of the week. You know, we don't know what's going to happen. We know what happened this week. We don't know what's going to happen next week up on Capitol Hill. So what we need to do so that we're on equal footing with all other Americans is be able to make sure that Washington, D.C. is a state. We have a population greater than Vermont and Wyoming. We pay more taxes than 23 other states. Yet, and our citizens, we fight and die and go to war. Our veterans are patriots. They go to war. They fight for the country. Yet, they can't even go up on Capitol Hill and talk to someone that can help them with benefits from Washington, D.C. because we're not a state. And that's wrong. So, I'm running to reverse the course. I've been working for the last 20 years to build awareness, create education, have been out in the States educating more Americans about our disenfranchisement. Unfortunately, most Americans don't even know about our condition. They believe Washington, D.C. is a place of monuments, memorials, and museums. They don't think anybody lives in Washington, D.C. We've got teachers, cab drivers, truck drivers. We are a place just like any other place in the country. We got a variety of people, but many people out in the world, outside of Washington D.C., believe that we're just a city of lobbyists and attorneys, and that's untrue. We're a place just like any other place. We've got mothers, we've got fathers, we've got people that drive trucks, we've got teachers, we got firemen, we got policemen, we've got a little bit of everything. And we want to be treated just like every other American. So that's why I'm saying to you that we need 2 senators and 1 member of Congress. I'm asking everybody in whatever state you're in to call your member of Congress and share your opinion. Nowadays, we have a problem with the history. Some parts of the country, they're rolling back what history is, what it means, and are revising whatever history is out there. But we need to be able to tell people the real history of Washington, D.C. and say that it's a place, it's in America, but our Americans are treated differently than any other American. You can go 3 miles this way and go over to Arlington, Virginia, and Alexandria. Just cross the bridge, for those folk who live in Virginia, yet you've got 2 senators and a member of Congress. Yet we are right here. You just cross the river. Just because we've crossed the river, we're disenfranchised. The folk who cross the river from one side to another, and that's not fair. So I'm asking people to support my campaign, which is Kinlow for U.S. Senator here in Washington, D.C. We go to the ballot on June 4th, and on June 4th, that is our primary. So let's keep it real, talk about D.C. statehood, talk about people, and moving people forward.
So you being a D.C. native, I'm sure, am I correct, you're from here in Washington, D.C.?
I'm from the south side of Washington, D.C., the Great Ward 8. Marion Barrow used to call it the last, the least, and the lost. But we are down with the people, because we are the people.
Absolutely.
Went to a little school called Ballou High School, University District of Columbia, a native Washingtonian, born and bred, and I'm not going anywhere.
We're seeing so much change in such a short amount of time. You're still a young man, of course. You know what I mean? You've come a lot of ground, but you got a lot more ground to cover. And thank you for showing up on behalf of Washingtonians and, being proud of where you're from and representing the way that you are. And, I'm sure the community that you serve certainly supports you too, proud of the man that you will become and becoming. And I like to say, going forward, where do you see the future of Washington, D.C.?
Well, one, it's hard being disenfranchised. It's hard being a second-class citizen in your own country. It's hard looking across the country and seeing people doing well because they've got elected leadership that gets recognized in the Senate. If we were a state, that's an extra $2 billion that we would get, because we get a chance to determine what we do with our money. Right now we got a $20 billion budget, which is a big number. But imagine an extra $2 billion. That's money that we can put in our schools, that we can put in our mothers. We can get kids going to school earlier. They're going to school now at 3. But we can provide for daycare for the mothers so that they can, and or fathers, so that we can take care of our kids appropriately.
Certainly. You started to ask different versions of a question that I was moved to ask.
Yes, sir.
If it was the first thing first when it comes to the community, what can you see being the number one extreme or service, if you will, that you would specifically make a point to support first?
Well, there's a lot of equals things that I think are kind of on the equal
Certainly,
platform.
if it could be narrowed down to one.
And
There's so many fingers on that fist, I'm sure.
One is, I'll just say healthcare.
Okay.
Maternal health is very, very important. And if you look at in this region right now, you'll see some statistics that you may think that you're in a third world country. Particularly as it comes with sisters that are black and brown. I mean, maternal health. I mean, why is it that women have kids here in this region? There may be some challenges in terms of anticipating survivability and viability of life for young folk. We need to be able to safeguard the next generation and the generation beyond that, and make those necessary investments to make sure that the next generation survives, and that the women have, primarily women, have the supports that are required to move forward.
Certainly would be in support. That means that it would help if the people who these programs would directly support excuse me, understood the value of what's being presented with them. In terms of mental health, what can you see being done to help support the reception of these resources? You know, we can't go forward making the same mistakes if we're not in tune with, the inner workings of who we are. How can we,
right.
how can we expect to manage
Right.
these opportunities in a sustainable way?
Well, health is very important, and we talk about maternal health,
Sure.
and that's one because it's a big bucket. But mental health is very important as well. We got to be able to provide the supports that people need to live their life and move forward in this environment with no stain, and not being dismissed because of any condition. We need investment of resources so that every American, every Washingtonian is looked upon as equal.
Certainly.
So investments, I can say more money, and more money will help.
Yeah.
And being a state will provide for more assistance for the priorities for residents of Washington, D.C.
That's right. Well, we certainly looking forward to creating more healthy societies and balance out the best we can.
Yes.
Look like we have a question.
Yeah, what can you say towards the homelessness epidemic in DC and how your administration, what you're doing, what you're running for, politically, how that's going to be? I know you said healthcare is huge and mental health, but what do you foresee you being in the Senate doing for the unhoused in DC or people experiencing homelessness?
Right, and I think that as a person who's from Washington, D.C., it's clear that there is a gap between where we want to be and where we are right now. There are a lot of folk who are out on the street. So let's continue to find ways to provide the supports, whether it's investments in mental health challenges, whether it's investments in job and job training, whether it's supports for the kids and the families that people have, making sure that no need is unmet, so that our unhoused population can move and thrive in this environment, getting jobs, getting housing. I think housing is important, and I think that there's still a way to go in how Washington D.C. can deal with housing. There's a lot of land here. So we need to figure out how we can best utilize some of the land that we can get from the federal government that can create some housing. For example, RFK Stadium. Some people say, well, hey, can we build a football stadium? Yeah, you could build that stadium there. But first, where can we provide housing for our people? And if we can create some housing, that will go a long way to equalizing society.
Yeah. And we look at housing, big housing communities like that. That also comes with the maintenance and the budget and stuff like that to make sure we keep it running. To imagine a project of that size, what do you think the estimated cost of something like that could be?
But for
the Kennedy building you just described?
RFK.
For the RFK, I don't know the cost, but there's an RFK stadium there right now that has been there since 1960 something, and has been falling down. We got to knock it down, and if there's an opportunity to put something else there, I say let's put it there. But if you've looked at Events DC, and if you go to their website, they've identified and created a plan for the usage of that space. And they've identified about 6 or 7 things that can go there. Not just one thing, but everything. And like a community, you know how you have a church and a business and a nonprofit. in a school. Well, the same thing can happen at RFK. I think there's a lot of different things that can go there.
It's like the facilities being paid for by the citizens for being there and not being used.
That's right. Well, think about it. The team has left 20 plus odd years ago. So, what's the real value of that site? Negligible. But let's find a way to get the higher and best uses of that site on board, which means let's make sure we get some housing. It's transit-oriented development because you got the subway station right there, right on some major lines right across from 295. So it captures a lot of traffic. If you figure out East Capitol Street, Benning Road, 295, well, let's figure out what we can put there to make it a destination.
Kingman Island as well.
Exactly. Kingman and yes.
Okay, real quick. How is that going to be different from the housing that they're throwing up now? And it's like $3,000 for like the space in the closet.
Well, I think that any new development, you get to create your own rules on who it applies to. You know?
Okay.
And the goal would be to have, I think it's an opportunity to create some world-class housing, which means maybe larger facilities at a price, because really you got like 76 acres right here in the middle of the Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe in the inner city you can be constrained. You build housing, you can only build a certain amount, and you can only build up to a certain height. The 1910 Height Act means we can only build about 12 stories.
Right.
But imagine you can build housing at RFK that's a little larger in the spaces because you're not confined by how wide out you can build or how high you can build. And I think that may provide an opportunity for larger spaces with more amenities.
So can I make a suggestion? Being an independent presidential candidate myself and driving across the entire country, meeting a lot of great people out here that have helped out facilitate things. Places like Dallas right now currently have a tiny home community for the actual people that are homeless there, where they're actually giving the tiny home to the homeless individual to help them out and get them set up.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to continuously be rotating people out of these because people eventually are going to get rehabilitated and actually go out there and actually find, get shelter in other places. But it's a tiny home that they're giving to the people. Why don't we do something like that with the RFK Stadium, honestly? Because I think it would be cost effective for the actual city to actually house all the people in the streets. Because it costs more, on paper, it costs more to keep people unhoused than it does to actually house them. And there's a lot of major cities out there that approve of this fact. So when I'm seeing these developments and stuff like this, I'm thinking to myself, DC, you guys are, like right now, I just saw the destruction of Berry Farms. That hurts. Because I know a lot of those people are getting pushed out into places that aren't going to be a part of the actual state itself. We're seeing an outflux of residents that originated from here in DC. And I know you've seen that as well.
Mm-hmm.
How can I reassure that these people are still going to be DC natives? Even when they're getting forced out, even though that this wasn't their choice. Like, this is where they have, this is what their available money is.
Right, and I think that, to your point, the tiny house concept, has a lot of positive things going for it. One, because it doesn't take that long to construct, right? Sometimes you may use containers and other things that means that really you can put a spot on site online in a time frame that may be months versus something that's more in the ground, shovel ready, that takes years. So I think I'd be willing to look at a variety of concepts on housing that will provide for it quicker instead of the old traditional type of model. Now, in terms of like Berry Farms, I grew up on the south side of town, went to Blue High School, and I'm very familiar with that site. The challenge that I've seen is how long it takes to develop a site. Yeah. Now, most of the folk who were at that site have the right to come back. But imagine if the development cycle is 10, 12 years. you've gotten on along to your life, and you're in a whole different life 12 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody ping you 12 years later and say, you ready to come back? You say, dude, I'm good. I'm good where I am. So we need to figure out how we can shorten the life cycle, because 12 years, 10 years is a long time. So how can we can create some projects, go into the ground, replace it with a structure, get people in quicker. Because, a generation, 20 years, 12, 10 years, that's a half a generation. Your kids are halfway out the door.
Numbers change.
Right. So I think that we just need to be a little bit more agile, quicker, smarter, in using new technologies, like the tiny houses. And I've seen what they've been able to do in Japan and a lot of other places. Just quickly, making sure that you can provide for a decent quality housing, safe, affordable, and that's what you want.
The military also uses a tiny shelter that costs approximately $5,000 per unit to actually house unhoused individuals and things like this. And I was just making honest suggestions to actually immediately house them. That's something that the DC budget currently would be able to actually help out with right there.
Well, I haven't seen that model, but obviously we are in an era where technology moves things a little faster.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about AI. Can we get AI to design something quickly?
I have a question about some of the timeliness and where we are now in the system versus if we were to become a state. So I'm going to be very specific, like with the DCHA, DC Housing Authority. They're taking a long time. Their website was down in December during the holidays. Nobody did anything. And their standard running time is 60, 90 days or more. And if we were to become a state, how would that change?
Well, for about 300 purposes under law, we're treated like a state. So the housing authority is treated and given kind of the same latitude as housing authorities in New York or New York City and other places. Unfortunately, bureaucracies move slowly, and I think that we're going to need some pressure from the people and elected officials to create some new change and some new pressure that allow for some new opportunities. The goal is to do what? The housing authority. Get people housed sooner, as quick as you can, in quality, affordable, in a community that serves all their needs. That means really for the newer models of housing, you want to have grocery stores close by, maybe embedded. You want to have health care right off the side. You want to have the schools right over here. You want to have partnerships that provide for a lot of different things right there, so that you can't say that, we put a housing authority here, buildings here, but there's no support. We want to start off with the concept that we want everything as a part of the beloved community with the housing authority. And now some of that may take a little longer, but I think that if we can do that, think about it. You do a new housing project where you've got all these partnerships, where you've got just built in, where you got a grocery store close by. There are a lot of food deserts, not just in Washington D.C., a lot of other places. And to conceive and try to create a new housing development without that is almost like saying failure, because nobody wants to get on two buses to go get some food, right? How much can you carry on two buses if you got to catch two buses? So the goal is to be able to make sure you got to incorporate all that, so that the community actually can not just survive but thrive.
Infrastructure.
It's a good word.
Well, Carl,
It's
man,
something we've
to bring us
discussed
to any
about.
type of closing, man. Thank you for so much insight, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
Okay.
If you were to leave us with one thing that you would like for us all to remember you by, or for, pick your mode.
All right. Well, the people united will never be defeated, and we just got to be able to want to unite, and we got to we gotta want a future where we're willing to fight. You know, nothing is given to you freely in this world. We've seen it. You know, you got to fight for it. You know, slavery was wrong, and so people say, "Well, how did it happen?" Well, you know, but the reverse of people had to fight for what was right, and that's what we're trying to do in D.C. statehood. I think that if we can change that paradigm, people in Washington D.C. could be treated as all other Americans, and there'll be greater opportunity in Washington D.C. for those things that are some of our ills. More money for our public education, more money for our kids, more money for our parents, more money for the infrastructure, so that you know, you drive down the street, you don't have to get a flat tire, you know, and things like that. So those are just some of the things I wanted to say. So my name is Eugene Kinlow, running for U.S. Senator in Washington, D.C. If you need to get at me, I've got a website, and it's Kinlow for U.S. Senator, or Kinlow for Senator. .com. You can reach me by email at Kinlow for US Senator at gmail.com. If you want to hit me on IG, you can do Kinlow DC, and there's a number of other ways that you connect with me. So thank you for your time, thank you for your advocacy, and the ability to share knowledge. Thank you so much.
26 minutes.